Hey class, welcome to chapter 6. In this video, we will be discussing the statute of frauds and what that means as in relation to contracts. We will not be getting into the parole evidence rule in this video. That will be a separate one, but I hope that you find this at least a little useful. As you know, you intuitively based on our conversations last week, already had the idea that, look, oral contracts are not the best, right? And they do hold in a court of law, but not all oral contracts. So there are contracts that must be in writing. And that's what the statute of frauds is about. What is really important is to recognize how, when, and where the writing element should be, and if there are any exceptions made in this general rule. So today, every U.S. state has enacted a statute of frauds. Remember, statute just means law. And this requires that certain types of contracts are to be in writing. And really, the purpose of that was to make sure that these really important contracts between people and businesses, that the important stuff isn't forgotten, or there isn't a misunderstanding of terms, or even fabricated in some instances. And since the statute of frauds does come from the state, you have to make sure that you understand your state statute of frauds because it can vary per state. Now, most of them have, the same basic principles, but you never know. So it's always good to check your specific state. Okay. So what does this involve? It involves, the certain types of contracts that are to be in writing, and this can be in real estate, the purchase of business, contracts for terms greater than 1 year. If I'm going to stand for the debt of another person, that needs to be in writing. Contracts for the sale of goods over $500 must be in writing. Agency contracts. And so there's quite a long list, but we can at least categorize it down into about 5 different ones as it relates to the statute of frauds. Now, the UCC also has the sale of contracts and what needs to be in writing. So those are going to be sale of goods over $500, sales of security, and other sales exceeding $5,000. But what we're really going to focus on today are these under the statute of frauds and the sale of goods for $500 or more. So there is a misconception that all the contracts that are written need to be drawn up by attorneys or that they have to be formally typed, but that's just not true. So there have been contracts, very famous contracts out there that have been signed on napkins, right? So be careful what you're making deals about over dinner. And it can be very simplistic. There are some forms that have to have certain elements to them, but in general, people can write contracts and they don't have to be approved by attorneys. And this is what can cause some huge issues. So, for example, if I'm a layperson, I don't know anything about the law, and I want to build a house, and a construction manager comes in and says, hey, I'd love to build this house for you, and you make this kind of verbal deal with them, and then the contractor shows up and there's like this 100-page document and you're like, what is even happening? My guess is most of what is going to be in that contract is going to protect the contractor, not you. So really be careful and make sure that you are actually reading these contracts. You don't want disputes in the long run, right? You think you're getting some top of the line cabinetry and your brand new house has the bottom of the line. And if it's not written in the contract, that you could have, arguments. All right, I'll move on. So for the first thing we're going to talk about is the land of sale. So one of the types of contracts, that have to be in writing is the land that is for sale. So you have land for sale and Jimmy John wants to buy it. According to the statute of frauds, it has to be in writing. So even if you decide that you want to sell this land to your brother, Jimmy John, or your cousin or your grandfather for $1,000, $20,000, whatever it is, that actually has to be in writing. So you can negotiate verbally, but you have to make sure that the terms are actually written out. And for those of you that have not taken real estate law, I kind of want to dive into a little bit about what does that include, because it's not just the actual land itself, okay? It's the buildings, it's the shed in the back, it's the garage. You can't take the garage door off of the garage and, after you've sold it, in hopes of saving that garage door. So anything that is fixed to that dwelling is included in the land. The trees, the soil, the crops, minerals. So you have grandma's favorite rose bush planted in your backyard. That either needs to be stipulated at the very beginning and be removed, or it goes as part of the sale to the house, right? And also what is involved are things called easements. Again, if you're not sure what this term is, think of it like Toledo Edison, your electric company, your gas company. They actually have an easement on the property. And so they can come into the property without any prior approval. It's like a strip of land right by the street, or it could be in the backyard where their lines are. And they have a right, without your permission, to go onto that easement and take care of matters that need to be taken care of. So it's the right to use someone else's land without actually owning that land. And then another element to this is what we call a life estate. And a life estate is interest in the land for a person's lifetime. So if you want to buy mom's house, but mom is still living, you can give mom a life estate that she lives there in that home until her death. Okay, so this one is pretty easy. This is the 1 year rule. So a contract must be in writing if, according to its terms, it can't be performed in 1 year. So that measurement is dated from the date of the contract until its completion date. So if I sign a contract January 2016, but I can't finish that contract until December 2020, then that must be in writing. Oops, sorry. So next is what we call a guarantee contract. And don't let this get you confused. Think of it as somebody is signing a guarantee for someone else. So paralegal student Amy hasn't graduated from college, doesn't have a great job right now, but is desperate for a car. She goes to the dealership. The dealership says, look, you don't have any credit whatsoever. We want to sell you this car, but you need a guarantor. So what'll happen in this case is that Amy's father says, okay, I want you to have a reliable car, so I will go and sign a guarantee contract. And what this means is that if Amy doesn't make the payments, her dad is responsible for them. So the guarantee contracts must be in writing. Another example of contracts that must be in writing are marriage promises. So this isn't like a promise to marry somebody necessarily, but it's things regarding finances like a prenuptial agreement. in a prenuptial agreement, there may be certain stipulations about how much money somebody will get after so many years of marriage, or what they won't get in the case of a divorce. Again, that has to be in writing. And yeah, I know it seems a little soon to have quiz time, but sometimes looking at examples is actually more helpful than looking at all the words. So here's a couple questions for you. We're going to take a look at some common issues and just test your basic knowledge. You might find that you know more than you think you do. Okay, true or false? If Fred cannot finish building a 20-story hotel by the contract's terms within 1 year of its formation, the contract must be in writing. True or false? Okay, that's probably annoying. The answer is true. So in this case, Fred is contracting to build a hotel. And like most other construction agreements, especially commercial, they're going to fall under this 1 year rule. It can take, by the time you sign a contract with somebody, it can take a couple years before you get that house built or before that commercial building gets built. And remember, the 1 year is determined by the formation date to the date of completion. So for example, look below here. A contract to provide services from February 2007 to November 2007 was signed in 2003. It has to be in writing. So just because it was signed in 2003 and the work isn't being done until 2007, there's too much of a gap. And too many misconceptions, misunderstandings can happen, which is why it needs to be in writing. True or false? Ed's car is selling a car called the Whammo for $499 to Jane. The contract between the parties does not have to be in writing. The answer is true. So even though we didn't go over this, it's a pretty easy rule to remember. But for the sale of goods, it has to be over $500 or more to be required to be in writing. So if you're selling, Aunt Gracie's bike for $30 on, social media, you don't need a contract for that. But if you are going to sell it for $500, you're supposed to. All right, multiple choice here. The statute of frauds purposes and an interest in land includes fixtures, B, mortgages, leases, easements, and life estates, C, insurance contracts on interest in land, D, A and B only, E, A, B, and C. D is the correct answer. So the fixtures, remember we talked about things that are attached to the land, the property, any kind of mortgages, leases, easements, and life estates must be in writing. All right, last question. Which of the following contracts is required to be in writing under the statute of frauds? A contract for the sale of one piece of business equipment costing $700. B, a contract for the sale of two pieces of business equipment costing $300 each. C, a contract for the purchase of a second-hand piece of home furniture from a consumer by a consumer in the amount of $600. D, A and B only. E, A, B, and C. Give you a couple seconds here. Guess what? All of them, because they all were at the $500 threshold. So it doesn't matter if it's being sold, from me to you and it's $600, a contract should be drafted. Okay, so this is my short video. And if you have any questions, honestly, please just reach out to me, text, email. I'm here to help you. There will be a second video for chapter 6, and have a great one. Bye, guys.